Hi there.
Hi.
Are your parents home?
No, actually, this isn't my house. This is my friend's house.
Okay. What about her parents? Are her parents home?
No, her mom's not home.
Ah. Can you just hold on to these for me?
Oh, yeah, sure.
Great. If you scream, I'm gonna shoot you. You're gonna come with me. Let's go. Stay there.
One of the most shocking murders of 2022 is by a doctor, Ronaldo Ortiz, an anesthesiologist out of Dallas. This is surveillance footage of him tampering with IV bags outside of the operating room, into which he allegedly injected poisonous medications. One of his colleagues who used one of these bags to rehydrate herself suffered cardiac arrest and died. It was noticed that after he was depositing these bags, otherwise healthy patients would have cardiac complications that were unexpected. This led to cardiac emergencies in 11 patients and the death of a colleague.
Have you ever wondered how accurate police sketches are? I'm going to show you a sketch, then the person, and we're going to see. And this is part of a series, so make sure you follow along. This is the Unabomber, probably the most famous police sketch ever drawn. And this is what was seen in 1987 by the only woman to ever see him in action. He'd go on to mail 16 bombs across the country over the course of 18 years. And this is a picture of a young Ted Kaczynski, the man that did it. The Unabomber was incredibly hard to catch because he lived in this shed and was a total recluse. It was actually his brother's wife that suggested that Ted was the Unabomber because she recognized his writing style in a letter that he had written to authorities. Thank God for observant women, and let me know if there's anyone else you want to see.
This is Sarah Boone, and she is a 42-year-old woman from Florida. And this is her boyfriend, George Torres. In February 2020, she claims that her and her boyfriend, George Torres, were playing a game of hide-and-seek drunk. She suggested that George Torres should get in his suitcase as a joke. He got in the suitcase and she zipped him up. Sarah Broom then claims to have fallen asleep upstairs because she was drunk. At least that's what she told the police. When she woke up the next morning, she found that her boyfriend George Torres was dead inside the suitcase. He was in there for so long that he obviously sadly passed away. Instead of calling the police, she actually called her ex-boyfriend. And when he came to the house, he told her she needs to ring the police. So she rang the police and told them everything. But she was lying, because when they checked her phone, they realised the real truth. And that was she intentionally locked him in this suitcase and filmed.
Do you remember the story of the adult woman who was pretending to be a child in order to get adopted? Well, the story is so much crazier than that. In 2010, the Barnett family adopted Natalia Grace, a 6-year-old girl from Ukraine. But shortly after the adoption, the family claimed that Natalia wasn't who she said she was. She couldn't speak any Ukrainian, which the family thought was weird, but she was also showing signs of being post-puberty, meaning she probably wasn't 6 years old. So the parents got a bone density test done on her, and the doctor said that she was at least 14, if not older. And on top of that, her behavior was starting to become menacing. She would stand over the parents' beds at night saying she was just waiting for the right time, and she threatened violence against the 3 other sons. One time she even tried to poison the mother. But what do the parents do? They get her age legally changed to 22 years old, rent her an apartment, and leave her in it by herself. They thought they were escaping a murderer, but many believe that they abandoned a disabled child. There's so many twists and turns to this story, and I do a whole deep dive on my podcast this week.
This girl killed her mum and then texted a photo of her body to her dad. In 2013, Rachel Hudson and her family were supposed to be celebrating Thanksgiving at their home in Virginia. However, the holiday would take a horrendously sinister turn. Rachel's mum was terminally ill 58-year-old Susan Lee. Rachel had been her mum's carer since she was just 9 years old. On the evening in question, Rachel and her dad got into an argument. When her dad left the house the next day to make the most of the Black Friday sales, Rachel did something unthinkable. She took a weapon out of the wardrobe and loaded it. She apparently thought about unaliving herself at this point, but she didn't want to put her mum through the trauma of finding her body. She then walked into the room where her mum was and said, "I'm sorry, this is what has to happen." Her mum apparently told her, "You're crazy," and this is the point where Rachel killed her mum. When she texted her dad to break the news to him, he obviously didn't believe what she was saying. She then took a photo of her mum's body and texted it over to her dad. Rachel was sentenced initially to 50 years in prison, but this was reduced to 18 years because of an apparent undiagnosed mental illness.
Marlene Warren, this is the scariest bro. This is true nightmare what happened to her. This happened in the 90s and she was from Florida. She had a son, and this one day, bro, I don't know exactly the time it was, somebody knocks on their door. She goes and answers the door, right? And it's a clown at her door.
That's
right?
scary as
I'm already knowing, bro. Like, that's why I said it's true nightmare. She opens the door. She's like, what the hell? The clown hands her like this like bundle of balloons and is basically saying like, you're the best and all this other shit, right? And then the clown pulls out a gun and shoots her straight in the head.
Holy
Kills her in front of her son, bro, and takes off, which is crazy as right? And by the way, she had a husband too. My bad, I forgot to even say that.
Yeah.
The husband wasn't home though, so he ends up coming through. You know, the police, everybody comes through. They find out what happens. He just tells them that a random clown came to the house and
shot my mom
and killed her. Right? They're grieving. The whole family's grieving, shit like that. The dad ends up moving on in 2002. Right? So he ends up remarrying. He gets with this girl. They're together for like a cool minute, bro, right? So they start interviewing, you know, him, his new girl, shit like that. They're asking all these questions. And it gets to the point where one of them crack. The new girlfriend
was the clown.
Wow. But this is what's crazy though, right?
Everyone should know about what has happened to Lauren Heike. Lauren was a 29-year-old esthetician and was hiking near her home in North Phoenix. 24 hours later, she was found murdered off a trail west of Scottsdale Road and Mile Boulevard. Almost immediately, authorities released this footage of a suspect running from the area. This person has since been identified as 22-year-old Zion Teasley. He was arrested at the Scottsdale home he shared with his mother, less than a mile from the scene. We now know that Lauren was followed and then chased down the Route 11 trail before being viciously attacked from behind. She suffered 15 stab wounds to the back and chest, but tried her hardest to put up a fight, with defensive wounds to her arms and her hands. Tragically, investigators believe that she eventually escaped, but her injuries were too severe to keep going. On the trail, police have found Lauren's belongings scattered, presumably dropped as she was running for her life. Her clothing suggested that at one point the chase went through a barbed wire fence, and it was actually DNA in her shoe that led to Zion's arrest. When police submitted this DNA sample, Zion's name came up in court records. Detectives then went to his former workplace, where his ex-coworkers recognized his clothing as merchandise that had been stolen from the store. They said he'd recently been fired for being aggressive towards female employees. Zion has since admitted to detectives that, like Lauren, he frequented the area. He identified himself as the man in the footage, and when shown a picture of Lauren, said that he, quote, wanted to look like her. He also reportedly spoke about growing up as a Christian, struggling with his sexuality, and how he hadn't been with anyone in a while. Finally, we know that in 2020, Zion was charged with robbery, kidnapping, and disorderly conduct, but was listed as a medium-low risk to reoffend and got a plea deal. He was released in November of 2022 and actually met with his probation officer after the murder. Interestingly, his mother works for a local county's probation department. So as of today, Zion is listed as a flight risk with a bail set at $1 million. Obviously, this is nothing short of terrifying, and it's a case that young women everywhere need to be aware of.
This guy altered his body in Mexico so he could become the perfect serial killer. This included having gastric bypass surgery when he was not overweight, just so he could focus on the hunt and not get distracted by hunger. He altered his teeth with unnecessary dental work and even possibly altered his fingerprints. He had several nose jobs, and he injected Botox in areas such as his armpits. This was so he would sweat less and decrease the chance of leaving his DNA at crime scenes. I'm talking about Israel Keys. And this guy didn't care who he killed, so there was no typical victim profile. He also often did his horrible deeds far away from home. He rented the cars he would use. He only used cash. He often wore disguises. And he wouldn't use his cell phone on his escapades. This guy killed people all over the entire country. I'm talking Alaska, Washington, Vermont, New York, and probably a lot of other places. He called Dennis Rader a wimp. Yeah, Dennis Rader, the serial killer known as BTK. It is believed that Israel Keys ended the lives of at least 11 people between 2001 and 2012. But that number is probably a lot higher, and he even alluded to that several times. I mean, he was on this spree for over 10 years. He loved hunting animals since he was a child, and he often spoke out about enjoying killing anything with a heartbeat. He just loved it so much that he eventually moved on from killing animals to people. At one point, he served in the US Army, and he said it was then that he decided he would start a life of crime. He also loved road tripping all over the country and leaving kill kits everywhere. That way, if he was ever in the area, he would have easy access to one. When he was finally caught in March of 2012, he never gave details about what he did to the people whose lives he ended. All he said is that he committed these crimes for himself as entertainment. Besides ending people's lives, he committed different crimes. This included breaking into people's houses, bank robberies, and burglaries. He said he only got caught because he got sloppy and broke his own rules. On December 2nd of 2012, he ended his own life at the Anchorage Correctional Complex in Alaska. At the time, he was 34 years old. I can't believe I just recently heard about this guy. I don't know why he isn't more talked about. But tell me, have you ever heard of him before?
Please be warned that this true crime case is incredibly disturbing. This man killed his son after his son found his horrifying selfies. You'll feel physically sick by what this man photographed. It was 2012 and Mark Redwine was living in picturesque Colorado. Mark had been divorced twice and had 2 kids with his ex-wife Elaine. The pair were in a custody battle over 13-year-old Dylan Redwine. Dylan had actually expressed to his brother Corey that he felt uncomfortable visiting his dad. It would later be revealed the likely reason for this. Some horrifying images that the brothers found in 2011. On the 18th of November, Mark picked Dylan up from the airport. Dylan had finally agreed to go on a trip to visit his dad. CCTV from the airport showed that the pair were barely interacting. Via text, Dylan agreed that the next day he would go to his friend's house. He was due to arrive there about 6:30 a.m. the next day. His last text was that night at 9:37 p.m. However, Dylan never showed up at his friend's house. His friend sent Dylan a text message at 6:46 a.m. seeing where he was. Unfortunately, he would never get a reply. Mark would later claim that Dylan had left the house and never returned. A huge search of the local area began. Now, within days of the disappearance, one of Mark's ex-wives told police something interesting. Disturbingly, he told her that if he ever had to get rid of a body, he would dispose of it in the mountains. He also apparently said to her that he would kill the kids before he let her have them. Mark was actually interviewed on TV and asked about his ex-wife's allegations against him. He appeared very suspicious to viewers and was talking about Dylan in the past tense. A whole 7 months passed until Dylan's body was tragically found. He was found only around 8 miles from Mark's house, just off an ATV trail. A witness actually came forward and said that they had seen Mark driving alone in the area in April 2013. Mark was very familiar with that area and actually owned an ATV himself. Mark and Dylan's mum also appeared on the Dr. Phil show. Basically, the episode was just them throwing allegations at each other. Interestingly, Mark failed to do a lie detector test. Then a telling discovery was made. In August 2013, police found Dylan's blood and human cadaver smell in Mark's lounge. A cadaver dog also indicated that human remains were present in the washing machine, on Mark's clothes, and in Mark's vehicle. Mark was arrested for second-degree murder and child abuse. So what were these disgusting photographs that the boys had found? The pair had discovered photos of Mark dressed in women's underwear consuming feces out of a nappy. I obviously cannot show these images on TikTok for obvious reasons, but you can find them on Google, but just be very prepared for disgusting images. Dylan and his dad's relationship had been gradually declining, and Dylan had actually asked his brother to send him the images so that Dylan could confront his dad. He had no idea that doing so would be fatal. The prosecution stated that this had triggered rage in Mark. He then killed his own son in the lounge of his house. He was eventually sentenced to 48 years in prison.
I'm going to jail. I love y'all. What? I love y'all. What you mean?
Friends, today's classless bastard is Shawntaria Jones. In 2018, she and her friend Shaylin Yeldon, with an acquaintance called Kima, went to meet Daquan Berry. However, he ends up dead. So what happened? Well, let's see what she says.
Do I think that you're a cold-blooded murderer? Yes. Do I think your girlfriends who are with you are cold-blooded murderers? Absolutely not. I know what cold-blooded murders are. You sit in the same seat as many of them have.
Mm.
Okay? Y'all were young.
Very.
Exactly. Whole life ahead of you. However, good things happen to bad people, or bad things happen to good people sometimes, is what I'm trying to say. And whatever happened that night, I mean, too much technology, too many people out there, too much social media,
Right.
too much everything. Okay? Now, yeah, this guy, he's out here selling weed.
Yeah.
All right? If he wasn't out there selling weed, would he have gotten killed that night? Probably not.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of times we put ourselves in bad, people who get killed put themselves in bad places sometimes. Not always, but a lot of times they doing something wrong.
Yeah.
All right? And here you are, 3 girls. You don't know if you're going to get jacked. You don't know what's going to happen.
Yeah.
Okay? All right? So, once we work this murder, all right, and we start compiling our information, autopsy, shell casings, evidence at the scene, phone, Facebook, the whole 9 yards. All right? I like to say, when we bring you in here, I say, you can tell the story for us. Or if you don't, when we go to court, I'm going to tell it for you. You know what I'm saying?
Yep.
All right.
Do it all the time.
So, regardless of this kid, 19-year-old kid, okay, young kid, all right, regardless of whatever he was still a son. He was still a brother. He was still an uncle. You know, he was a grandchild. All right, and nobody has the right to take anybody's life. Do accidents happen? Absolutely. That's why we're sitting here today, because we have done our homework. All right, because we have Shay on her way in, and we have Kima on her way in. All right, we have your car. We have your car seized. We seized your car today.
Yeah,
okay?
I seen that, and I'm like,
how'd you see that? How do you know?
Well, I didn't see that. They told me when I was sitting on the porch right before I came here.
We seized your car. And, of course, the first thing, your lovely boyfriend, that y'all's tumultuous relationship that you have, you know, arguing back and forth. So he wants to get that seat on the bus. So he says, hey, Sarge, can I talk to you? I said, yeah, what you got, man? So we go talking a little private, you know, in the back of the car and bring him down here. And he said, my old lady, my girlfriend, told me and her mother what happened last night. All right?
So what you just said, he told you this today. So he said, I told him this last night.
Said you told, that's what he said. You told your mom and him at the same time about what took place. And hang on, let me talk. Okay? All right?
3 dead bodies were found stuffed into this hollowed out tree in the middle of the woods in 2010. And when it came to who the murderer was, truth is stranger than fiction. This is Matthew Hoffman, and in November of 2010, he murdered 3 people and kidnapped a 13-year-old girl who he held hostage for days. On November 9th, 2010, Matthew went into the woods and spent the night camping. Then the next morning, on November 10th, he decided to wake up and break into the home of Tina Herman. So, unfortunately that day, when Tina Herman returned to her house, Matthew Hoffman had broken in. And as soon as he saw her, he freaked out, dragged her into a bedroom, and stabbed her multiple times with a hunting knife, killing her. But what Matthew didn't know was that Tina's friend Stephanie was coming over to meet her that morning. And while Matthew was dealing with Tina and her dead body, Stephanie entered the residence. Matthew freaked out, he stabbed Stephanie a number of times with the same hunting knife, even continuing to stab her after she was dead. And hearing all of this, the family's dog started to bark violently, and Matthew then stabbed and killed the family dog as well. After this, he dragged both of the women's bodies into the bathroom, dismembered them in the tub along with the body of the dog, and stuffed the body parts into trash bags. Shortly after finishing the dismemberment process, though, Tina's 2 children, Cody and Sarah, arrived home from school. Immediately after walking into their house, Matthew stabbed Cody in the back of the head, killing him instantly, then chased Sarah up into her room where he bound and gagged her with a cord from a fan in her room. So after dismembering Cody's body and stuffing him into a trash bag as well, Matthew brought out the 3 bodies that he had chopped up and placed into garbage bags, stored them in his car, and then brought out Sarah, who was still alive. After this, he brought Sarah and the bodies of Tina, Stephanie, and Cody back to his own house, where he kept Tina locked in a crawl space. And this is where the story gets really weird. So Matthew Hoffman was a self-professed tree lover, and his entire home was covered in leaves. I'm talking about piles of leaves, bags of leaves nailed to the walls. And apparently, according to his neighbors at the time, Matthew had exhibited some really strange behavior prior to the murders. He had apparently been trapping squirrels in his backyard, killing them and grilling them. He allegedly spent hours sitting up in the trees in his backyard, just staring at the other trees and watching squirrels. And for a while, he had actually worked as a professional tree trimmer. But let's get back to the story. So after bringing Sarah back to his house, along with the bodies of the other people he had killed, he locked her in a bathroom and even tied himself to her and took a nap. Afterwards, he headed back to the crime scene, did some cleanup, and then eventually brought Sarah into a crawl space, which was once again covered in leaves, dark and damp. And while she was chained up and held hostage inside of this crawl space, for days he visited her regularly and would SA her. Keep in mind, at the time, Sarah was only 13 years old, and her mom, her brother, and her family friend had been murdered right in front of her. Finally, though, a few days later, Matthew was arrested after police found him parked in his own car right next to the abandoned car of one of his victims. Tina, Coda, Sarah, and Stephanie had been missing for days now, so the police obviously went and searched Matthew's house, and that's when they made the gruesome discovery of Sarah chained up in the crawl space. This is an actual photo that the police released eventually of Sarah exactly as they found her. They actually had to take these photos for evidence before they released her, and they obviously immediately arrested Matthew. So for a while after his arrest, Matthew would not release the location of the bodies to the police. They were desperately trying to find the bodies of those people that he had killed, but he wouldn't tell them anything. That is, until they took the death penalty off the table, and that's when he revealed that he had stuffed the 3 corpses into a hollowed out tree in the middle of the woods. Police immediately then went and found the tree, and inside they found the bodies of Cody, Stephanie, and Tina in those trash bags, dismembered. Eventually, the tree was torn down, but how bizarre is this story? Eventually, Matthew Hoffman was sentenced to life in prison without parole, and this whole story is just kind of mind-blowing. He's been nicknamed the Leaf Killer for doing the things that he did, for his obsession with leaves, the way that he placed the bodies inside of a hollowed-out tree trunk. I've never really heard a story like this, and I hope to never hear one like this again.